Hi, welcome back to Altis on Track. Today, we're going to talk to you about rudiment, low walks, and crawls, all of which exist in our programming year-round, generally at the end of our lower intensity days. We will start with rudiment, as we see here. Now, this particular form of rudiment alternates a low hop with a slightly higher hop, but they're still pretty low intensity. Different from traditional plyometrics, what we're really looking for here is to work on the coordination of the joints of the legs, rather than fast ground contact or powerful propulsion. Ideally, what we should be seeing is a balanced yielding at the knee and hip joint with stiffness around the ankle joint. One of the biggest issues we see with younger sprinters or team sport athletes is excessive plantar flexion, both at initial ground contact and at toe off. Working on rudiment hops can help athletes to develop the awareness of a stiff ankle at impact and a propulsion that is generated from the hip and the knee rather than the relatively weak ankle joints. Now, rudiment was initially developed by Altis head coach Dan Paff in the mid-'80s while he was working at LSU. It was in response to some of the really poor jumping mechanics of many of the athletes he was working with. So he came up with the rudiment hops to, sort of act as a mastery progression scheme to more intense jumping, moving from simple, basic hops to more complex schemes as we see here. We can challenge the coordination further by holding the medicine ball at varying positions relative to the center of mass. Or we can, and often do, use single leg hops as well. Now, this was our fourth week of training and is an early progression, so simply forwards, backwards, and sideways. So now we move on to low walks and lunges. Like the rudiment, we typically do these at the end of a more extensive session. We have a few benefits of doing this work. Firstly, it can be a decent general strength load for some athletes, especially if we take them out past 20 or 30 meters. This is why most coaches probably started prescribing them actually. Once upon a time, weight rooms were a little less commonplace, and many athletes had to do their strength work with just their body weight and maybe some medicine balls. Especially on the road, this type of work was a good alternative to not doing weights for a few weeks at a time. But that's probably not the primary reason why we do them. Like the rudiments, we tend to do these barefoot. And if they do them correctly, this can be more of a foot exercise than a leg exercise. I ask the athletes to slowly roll from heel to toe and try to feel every part of their foot, melting it into the ground as they roll over it front to back or back to front. And like the rudiment, we do these forwards, backwards, and sideways. And one question we get is, do we tell the athletes to be at a certain depth? Well, in my experience, the athlete will self-select the depth that is cost efficient for them, as long as we describe the intention of the exercise appropriately. With that, more fascially dominant athletes will self-select a higher position, while more muscularly dominant athletes, as we see here, will self-select a lower position. And finally, and this is totally anecdotal, but athletes tend to feel better the next day after doing some of this, sort of kind of isometric work at the end of an extensive session. And lastly, we have crawls. These are pretty hard for most of my folks. They're a really good total body general strength exercise, but just as it is with the low walks and lunges, they also have multiple good things going for them. Developing stability through the shoulders is the obvious one, but I also like, if you want to do these well, the athletes will really have to pay attention to how their feet flex and move. Check out the feet here. I love all the things that are happening, especially at the bottom of the feet. Now, like all the other things, these exercises also give us a great opportunity to screen what is going on with each individual, and perhaps provide us some guidance to therapy or exercise prescription, whether it be in the weight room or as part of their homework. For example, athletes who can't flex their great toe well will have real issues here. And if they can't, that really gives us some insight into what type of work they should be doing away from us. Now, we tend to keep these pretty basic. Again, forwards, backwards, and sideways, both with maybe bent legs and straight legs. There's probably more creative names, but I don't know what they are. Anyways, thanks for joining us. I hope that was useful for you. Join us next time on Altis on Track.